Welcome back to another Mythology Monday with me, your host, Alice. Today I'm in a different location. This is my bookshelf that is on the other side of my basement. So feel free to take a moment to zoom in. Look at all my lovely books. This is my indie TBR bookshelf. This is my general TBR bookshelf. Also TBR, also TBR, a lot of TBRs. There's like one or two books up here that are also TBRs. But ooh, lots of fantasy in my little night. So lovely. Anyway, we are here today to talk about family journals, or grimoires, if you would prefer. And so as you can see, I thought this was a great place to have this conversation since I'm surrounded by books. And on this side, I'm surrounded by more books, but also some really cute fake spellbook journals that just look really lovely. And inside are just a notebook. They look like spell books and pretty things. But anyway, I digress. So in a lot of mythologies, there are really important texts that have meaning or historical context to the players in the particular mythological tale that we are referencing. And so when it comes to the world of Taurean and the Head, the Heart, and the Air series, there is no difference in that. There are several really important texts that will come up in the story, and pretty much every book I've written, there's a different one that appears. The majority of these books are incredibly important because the different sorcerer lines have what are referred to as journals or line books, where these are the books that are written by the Titan of every generation, where they put their special skills, spells and all the things that they've learned about their line and such into their journals. And so then the next generation's Titan has access to these journals that then allows them to learn the skills and the more evolved things that the Titans have learned. And so they can become the better Titan faster by learning all the magic and the powers that the previous Titans have harnessed and what they've done to control this. Now, what is special about the journals, and that is the majority of the Titan journals are actually housed in the Library of the Head, which is located in the Forbidden Lands, if you've watched the previous videos and you remember. So the castle that houses the head or the king of the sorcerers has the majority of these line books in them, with the exception of the books of Merlin and Cassandra, which are, if you remember, Alex's lines. And the reason for that being is when her uncle and mother fled from the Forbidden Lands and the sorcerers, they took their line books with them. And because Merlin was such a young line, like Alex, there's only 4 or 5 generations. It's Alex, her mother and uncle's generation, her grandfather Hermes, and her great-grandfather was Merlin. So she is literally there's 3 generations down from Merlin. So they didn't have a ton of line books. The majority of the Merlin line books were actually written by Merlin. And so because of that, they took all of these books with them, and Alex's mother was responsible for them and has hidden them. So that's a spoiler from The Head, the Heart, and the Air. If you haven't read it, why are you on my channel? But anyway, I digress. So she has access to some of these books, and they are going to be incredibly helpful for her. Now, because the majority are held by the head, some of them will come into play in later books where she eventually does, or they eventually find their way to the Forbidden Lands. They get access to a larger proportion of these kinds of books and that, or they just simply need to figure out a way to get their hands on some of them when they're dealing with a particular magical mishap or conundrum, and they need a specific book from another line. Like, for example, if they were having an issue with earthquakes, they would need a Merlin line, because Cassandra and Merlin isn't going to help with that. If it was a super dry season and they had forest fires, maybe they'd want a Salem one or a Poseidon one to find out how to keep the atmospheric, like the air, more moist so that fires don't start. Because Alex can wield water, she has to be near it to have a large amount of water at her ready, which is not something that's possible when you're in Dayton, which is far, far away from the seas, unlike Warren and the Betruger. So the books are incredibly important, and not only are they important, they're meaningful to Alex, because not only do they have their family lines, they also have historical journals. And this is something that is done by both the sorcerers and the humans. So Alex's mother has left her a journal which is full of letters and information for her that she would need to know or want to know in order to figure out her history and her powers and this kind of thing. But the kings in all of the kingdoms have also created historical journals. So it's referenced early in book 1 that Aaron had to study these books when he was learning how to become a king and that, and got into quite a few fights with Jerome about having to read these journals by the kings and calling them all idiots because they were so obsessed with war and battles and that. And so Aaron actually went ahead and read the majority of these books and tried to prove that way the kings could have done things differently. And so Alex has the same situation in Warren, where she has her father and her grandfather and her great-grandfather's journals about what they learned when they were kings, how they changed things, what they did to make the people happy when X and Y and Z happened. And these are incredibly important for them as they're starting their journeys on being royals and figuring out what it is they can do to make their kingdom stronger and better. Because if Aaron wants to make Dayton more modern thinking, he has to look back in the history of Warren where things were a little bit more like Dayton, and they'll probably be able to find things there to help them bring Dayton a little bit more into the modern world and find out ways to help them in their journeys to being royals and that, which is fantastic because there is that really sage advice that those who fail to study history will repeat it. And clearly nobody wants to repeat the times where Dayton and Warren were at war with each other because nobody won with that. And so that is why the books and journals and this sort of thing are so critical to the world of Torrent. The other thing that comes up a couple of times in my books, and even some of my editors were like, why is this here, is the actual literary books that exist in our world. So there are references to things like Beowulf and the Iliad and that. And the reason being is that there are 3 or 4 sorcerer lines that are stemmed from Greek mythology gods. And so when those gods came, they brought their tales and their legends with them when they escaped from Troy and our ancient history and came into Torrent, and they brought with them the Iliad and when there was a giant war between the humans and the sorcerers like 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, the stories and fables from the sorcerers came over into the human world, and they loved those tales so much that they kept them, which is why Alex and Aaron are so obsessed with the Iliad and reading these types of books with grand adventures and heroic journeys and that, because it is a really exciting tale for them to read. But the reason they exist in the world is because Hades, Poseidon, Ares, and Cassandra came from Troy and found their way into the Taurian and into my world, which is because, you know, they're magic, they can go into other worlds. But that is where those tales have come from, and it's my one little connection that draws you back in and reminds you, maybe, just maybe, these sorcerers came from our world. So those books in themselves also are valuable, but they're also valuable because there's a sentimental attachment in that Aaron and Alex have their same favorite book. And so they steal books from each other and leave notes in each other and annotate the books for each other, which is a really fun thing to do. I personally don't write in my books. Not allowed. But I know lots of people who annotate them. I like hearing other people's thoughts on books and that. So the idea that they leave each other messages is a really cute. And it's one of the things I love about the way they got together is that they both have this in-depth understanding of literary books and that, and wanting to share it with each other. So that's all for today, Mythology Monday. Over the next couple of weeks, things are gonna bounce up a little bit because I've come to the end of all the different things that I go through, and now I get to go right back to the beginning and start cycling back, talking about my world and my characters and the mythology that I've used and studied and have brought into life. I might start by talking about some new mythologies that I've read or some of my favorite tales that I came across in my research. I haven't decided yet, but expect there might be a week missing between now and when I start that up. But just know that I've got some really great mythology stuff coming. It's not going away. It just might miss a week while I catch up a little bit and get a bunch of videos ahead, as I like to do, so that I'm always ready to give you more mythology fun. So have a great Monday, and thanks for stopping by. Bye.